Jake had been in the military for 8 years, and he thought he'd seen everything. Desert operations, night raids, protecting diplomats in dangerous places. But nothing prepared him for the phone call that came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Report to base command immediately, his superior officer said. Bring your gear. This is classified beyond anything you've handled before. Jake threw on his uniform and drove through the empty streets. The base was buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Strange vehicles he didn't recognize sat in the parking lot. Men in suits walked around with serious expressions, talking in hushed voices in the briefing room. Colonel Williams stood at the front with a folder marked Top Secret in bold red letters. Jake had worked with the colonel for 3 years and had never seen him look this tense. What you're about to hear cannot leave this room, the colonel began. 3 months ago, we recovered something that crashed in the Nevada desert. Not a plane, not a missile, something else entirely. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He'd heard rumors, of course. Every soldier had. But he'd always assumed they were just stories. We have a visitor, the colonel continued, and we need our best security specialist to keep her safe and contained. That's you, Jake. The word her caught Jake off guard. He'd expected talk of monsters or weapons, not someone the colonel referred to as a person. She's intelligent, possibly more than we are. She speaks our language perfectly. She's been asking for someone to talk to. The colonel's eyes met Jake's. Your job is to watch her, protect the facility from her, and protect her from anyone who might want to harm her. Think you can handle that? Jake nodded, though his mind was racing with questions. What exactly am I protecting her from, sir? Everyone, the colonel replied grimly. There are people who want to study her, people who want to use her, and people who want to eliminate her. Your job is to make sure none of that happens without proper authorization. The drive to the facility took 2 hours through winding desert roads. Jake had never been to this part of Nevada before. The building looked like a research center from the outside. All glass and steel, surrounded by high fences and security cameras. Inside, everything was white and sterile. Scientists in lab coats hurried through hallways carrying clipboards and tablets. Armed guards stood at every corner. The whole place hummed with nervous energy. Dr. Peterson, the head scientist, met Jake at the elevator. She's on the 3rd floor, he said as they rode up. We've given her comfortable quarters, but don't let that fool you. She's extremely intelligent and probably planning something every moment of every day. Planning what? Jake asked. Escape, most likely. Maybe contact with her people. We're not entirely sure what she's capable of. The elevator doors opened to reveal a long hallway with several doors. At the end was a large window that looked into what appeared to be a comfortable apartment. Jake could see a living area with a couch, bookshelves, and a small kitchen. And then he saw her. She was sitting at a table reading a book. At first glance, she looked completely human, tall, graceful, with long dark hair that seemed to catch the light in unusual ways. But as Jake looked closer, he noticed the differences. Her skin had a subtle glow to it, like moonlight on water. Her eyes were larger than normal, a deep purple color that seemed to hold depths Jake couldn't fathom. She looked up, as if sensing his presence, though Jake was sure she couldn't see him through the one-way glass. Her gaze seemed to look directly at him, and he felt an odd chill run down his spine. It's beautiful, isn't she? Dr. Peterson said. Don't let that fool you. We estimate her species is several thousand years more advanced than we are. She could probably kill you with her bare hands. If she wanted to? Jake didn't respond. He was too busy trying to process what he was seeing. This wasn't some monster from a science fiction movie. This was a person. Someone who read books and sat quietly at tables just like any human would. What's her name? We call her Subject Alpha. She's given us a name in her language, but it's unpronounceable. Something about starlight and music, according to our linguists. What does she do all day? Reads mostly. We've given her access to our entire digital library. She's gone through more books in 3 months than most people read in a lifetime. Philosophy, science, history, literature. She seems particularly interested in human psychology and sociology. Dr. Peterson handed Jake a thick folder. This contains everything we know about her species, her capabilities, and the protocols for interaction. Study it carefully. Your first shift starts tomorrow at 0800. That night, Jake sat in his temporary quarters, reading the file. The visitor ship had been found buried in the desert after satellites detected the crash. She'd been unconscious when they found her, badly injured, but alive. The ship was unlike anything human technology could produce, made of materials that seemed to bend light and contain energy in impossible ways. She'd recovered quickly. Too quickly for human medicine to explain. Within days, she was speaking perfect English, apparently having learned it by listening to radio and television broadcasts. She was cooperative, but guarded, answering questions about basic things but refusing to discuss her technology or the location of her homeworld. The most disturbing part of the file was the list of proposed experiments, sleep deprivation studies, to test her endurance, medical procedures to understand her biology, psychological pressure to make her more cooperative. Jake felt sick reading it, but he reminded himself that she wasn't human. The rules were different, weren't they? The next morning, Jake reported for his first shift. He was given a chair outside her quarters and told to observe and report anything unusual. Through the window, he watched her go through what appeared to be a morning routine. She moved with fluid grace, every gesture deliberate and purposeful. Around noon, Dr. Peterson appeared with a lunch tray. "She's requested to speak with you," he said. "We've decided to allow it. It might help us learn more about her psychology." Jake's heart rate increased. What should I say? Nothing important? Just listen and observe. Remember, she's not human. Don't let her manipulate you. The door to her quarters opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside and immediately felt like he was entering a different world. The air seemed charged with energy and he could smell something like flowers and rain, though he couldn't identify the source. She was sitting on the couch, watching him with those impossible purple eyes. Up close, her otherworldly nature was even more apparent. Her skin seemed to shimmer slightly, and when she moved it was with a grace that no human could match. "You're the one they've assigned to watch me," she said. Her voice was soft, musical, with an accent Jake couldn't place. "I've been curious about you. I'm here to ensure your safety and security," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice professional. She smiled, and Jake felt his breath catch. "Safety? From what?" "I'm in a cage, surrounded by people who see me as either a threat or a prize. Who exactly are you protecting me from?" "I'm just doing my job," Jake said, but even as he said it, the words felt hollow. "I'm sure you are. May I ask your name?" "I know they call me Subject Alpha, but I'd prefer to know what to call you." Jake hesitated. Protocol said he shouldn't give personal information, but something about her direct gaze made lying feel impossible. "Jake," he said finally. She repeated, as if testing how the name felt. "I'm called many things in my language, but the closest translation would be Lyra. It means song of the stars in your words." "Lyra," Jake said, and immediately felt like he'd crossed some invisible line. She wasn't Subject Alpha anymore. She was Lyra, a person with a name and a story. "Tell me, Jake," she said, settling back on the couch. "Do you believe I'm dangerous?" Jake looked at her, sitting calmly in her comfortable prison, reading human books and asking polite questions. "I don't know," he answered honestly. An honest answer. "I appreciate that." She picked up the book she'd been reading. "I've been learning about your species through your literature. It's fascinating how you tell stories to understand yourselves. This one is about a man who becomes a monster. But the real question is whether he was always a monster inside or whether circumstances made him one." Jake recognized the book. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. "Yes, it makes me wonder, Jake. In your story, who is the monster? The alien in the cage or the people who put her there?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on following orders, on doing his duty, that he hadn't really thought about what this situation looked like from her perspective. She was a prisoner, held against her will by people who saw her as either a threat or a resource to be exploited. "I should go," he said, standing up quickly. "Of course," Lyra said softly. "But Jake, Thank you for telling me your name. It's been a long time since someone treated me like a person instead of a specimen. As Jake left her quarters, her words echoed in his mind. For the first time since receiving this assignment, he began to wonder if he was on the right side of this situation. And that thought scared him more than anything else in the classified file. That night, Jake lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would return to his post, watching over the woman who read human books and asked uncomfortable questions. The woman who might be the most dangerous thing his species had ever encountered, or might be the most vulnerable person. 3 weeks had passed since Jake's first conversation with Lyra, and he'd fallen into a routine that was both comfortable and deeply unsettling. Every morning at 8, he'd take his position outside her quarters. Every day he'd watch her through the one-way glass as she read, exercised, and seemed to think about things far beyond what any human could comprehend. She had a way of arranging her breakfast that fascinated him. Not just eating, but creating patterns with her food that looked almost like art. Geometric shapes that seemed to have meaning, though Jake couldn't guess what. When she was done eating, she'd sit quietly for exactly 20 minutes, her eyes closed, completely still. Dr. Peterson called it meditation. But Jake thought it looked more like she was listening to something no one else could hear. She's adapting to, well, Dr. Peterson said during one of their daily briefings, most prisoners show signs of stress, depression, anger. She seems almost content. It's unnatural. Maybe she's just handling it better than we would, Jake suggested. Then immediately regretted speaking up, if he wasn't supposed to have opinions about the subject. Or maybe she's planning something, Dr. Peterson replied sharply. Don't forget what she is, Jake. Your job is to watch her, not sympathize with her. But Jake was finding it harder and harder to see Lyra as just a subject to be monitored. During their supervised conversations, which happened every few days, she'd ask him questions that stayed with him long after his shift ended. What do you dream about, Jake? She'd asked the previous week. I don't really remember my dreams, he'd answered, which was mostly true. I dream about flying between stars, she'd said, her purple eyes distant. Not in a ship, but just moving. Through space like swimming through water. In my dreams, space isn't cold and empty. It's warm and full of music. Do you think dreams show us what we're missing in our waking lives? Jake had no answer for that, but the question haunted him. He'd started paying attention to his dreams, and found they were mostly about being trapped in places he couldn't escape from. The conversations were supposed to be part of the research program. Dr. Peterson wanted to understand how Lyra thought. But Jake suspected she was learning more about humans than they were learning about her. Your species is fascinating, she'd told him during another session. You're capable of such incredible kindness and such terrible cruelty, sometimes within the same person. Take you, for example. You're gentle with me, respectful, but you're also keeping me prisoner. Do you see the contradiction? I'm following orders, Jake had said. The same response he always gave when she pushed too hard. Yes, but whose orders? Why do those orders matter more than what you think is right? These weren't the kind of questions Jake was used to dealing. Within the military, you followed orders. You trusted that the people above you knew better, had more information, were making the right choices. You didn't question the mission. But as the days passed, Jake began to see things that made him uncomfortable. He watched through the security monitors as scientists ran tests on Lyra that seemed designed more to cause discomfort than to gather information. Sleep studies, where they kept her awake for days at a time. Temperature experiments where they made her quarters uncomfortably hot or cold. Psychological tests that were clearly meant to break down her mental defenses. Through it all, Lyra remained calm and cooperative. She answered their questions politely, submitted to their tests without complaint, and treated everyone with a dignity that Jake found remarkable. Even Dr. Peterson, who clearly saw her as nothing more than a valuable specimen. Doesn't it bother you? Jake asked her one day after watching her endure a particularly unpleasant medical examination. What they do to my body? Lyra considered the question carefully. Pain is temporary, Jake. What bothers me more is what this is doing to all of you. The scientists who have forgotten that discovery should serve life, not destroy it. The guards who have stopped seeing me as someone deserving of basic respect, and you who struggle every day with what you know is right versus what you've been told to do. I'm fine, Jake said quickly. Are you? When did you last sleep through the night? When did you last call someone you care about just to hear their voice? When did you last do something because it made you happy, not because it was your duty? Jake realized he couldn't answer any of those questions. His ex-wife had left him because he'd become so consumed with work that he'd forgotten how to be a person outside of his uniform. He had no close friends, no hobbies, no life beyond following orders and completing missions. My species has a saying, Lyra continued. The cage that protects can also imprison. You think you're keeping me contained, but what has containing me done to contain you? That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of the facility, passing other guards, scientists working late shifts, researchers analyzing data from the day's experiments. Everyone moved with purpose, but Jake wondered if anyone really understood what that purpose was anymore. He found himself in the facility's small library, a room most people ignored. On a whim, he pulled out the book Lyra had been reading when he first saw her, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He'd read it in high school, but remembered almost nothing about it. Reading it now, Jake understood why Lyra had been drawn to it. It was about a man who tried to separate the good and evil parts of his nature, only to discover that they couldn't be divided without destroying both. The monster wasn't something separate from Dr. Jekyll. It was part of him, created by his refusal to accept that good and evil existed together in every person. Interesting choice? Jake looked up to find Colonel Williams standing in the doorway. His superior officer looked tired, older than Jake remembered. Just trying to understand what she finds so fascinating about our literature, Jake said, closing the book. And what have you concluded? Jake hesitated. It felt like dangerous territory. I think she's trying to understand what makes us human, our contradictions, our capacity for both good and evil. And what do you think she's concluded? That we're more complicated than we want to admit. Colonel Williams nodded slowly. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you think she's dangerous? The question Jake had been dreading. Physically, probably. She's stronger than she looks, faster than any human. Mentally, she's smarter than anyone in this facility, but dangerous in the way we're treating her? I don't think so. Explain. Jake took a deep breath. She's had dozens of opportunities to hurt people, to try to escape, to be uncooperative. Instead, she answers questions, submits to tests, and tries to understand us. If she wanted to cause harm, I think she would have done it by now. Or she's waiting for the right moment. Maybe. But what if she's not? What if we're torturing someone who came here peacefully? Colonel Williams was quiet for a long moment. Jake, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. We've detected signals from space in the same frequency range as her ship's communications. We think her people are looking for her? Jake felt his heart rate increase. What does that mean? It means our time is limited. The research team wants to accelerate their studies, get as much information as possible before we potentially have to deal with more of her kind. Accelerate how? More intensive testing? Longer sessions? Pharmaceutical enhancements to make her more cooperative. Jake felt sick. You mean drugs? You mean whatever it takes to get the information we need to protect our planet? Information we need isn't in her head. What if it's in how we treat her? Colonel Williams stared at Jake for a moment. What are you saying? I'm saying that if her people are coming to look for her, the way they find her might determine whether they see us as friends or enemies. Right now, we're giving them every reason to see us as a threat. That's not your decision to make, Jake. Sir, it's not. But it might be the most important decision any of us ever make. As Jake walked back to his quarters that night, he realized that everything was about to change. The signals from space meant that Lyra's captivity wouldn't last much longer. Soon, the whole world might know about her existence. And when that happened, Jake wasn't sure which side of history he wanted to be on. He thought about Lyra's question from earlier. The cage that protects can also imprison. Jake was beginning to understand that he wasn't just guarding Lyra. He was guarding himself against the possibility that everything he'd believed about duty Loyalty and following orders might be wrong. The next morning, Jake reported for duty. As usual, but as he took his position outside Lyra's quarters, he knew he was no longer just a guard following protocol. He was a man who would soon have to choose between his orders and his conscience, and he was terrified of what that choice might cost him. Jake knew he was in trouble the moment he realized he was looking forward to seeing Lyra every morning. It had been 6 weeks since his assignment began, and what started as professional duty had become something he couldn't quite name. Something that made his chest tight and his thoughts scattered. It wasn't just her otherworldly beauty, though that was undeniable. Her skin seemed to glow with its own light, and her purple eyes held depths that made him feel like he was drowning in the best possible way. But it was more than that. It was the way she listened when he spoke, really listened, as if his words mattered more than anything else in the universe. It was her laugh, musical and rare, that made him want to find ways to hear it again. "You're different today," Lyra observed during one of their supervised conversations. "Something's troubling you." Jake glanced at the camera in the corner, knowing Dr. Peterson was watching. "I'm fine," he said, but even he could hear how unconvincing it sounded. "Your species has tells," Lyra said softly. "Small signs that reveal your inner state. You touch your neck when you're nervous. You avoid eye contact when you're conflicted. And you've been doing both since you walked in here." Jake's hand dropped from his neck, where he hadn't even realized it had been resting. "You study us that carefully?" "I study you," she corrected, and something in her tone made Jake's heart skip. "Not humans in general." "You, Jake. I find myself wondering what you think about when you're not here. Whether you have family who worry about you. What makes you smile when no one is watching." The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them should cross. Jake knew he should change the subject, redirect the conversation to safer ground. Instead, he found himself answering. "I don't smile much anymore," he said. "My ex-wife used to say, I forgot how to be happy." Maybe she was right. What happened to her? She left, said I loved my job more than I loved her, said I'd built walls so high that she couldn't reach me anymore. Lyra was quiet for a moment. "And did you love your job more than her?" Jake thought about it honestly. I thought duty was the same as love. That protecting people, following orders, serving something bigger than myself was enough. I was wrong. What would you do differently now? The question was simple, but it cut straight to the heart of everything Jake had been struggling with. "I'd choose the person over the protocol," he said without thinking. Then immediately wished he could take the words back. But Lyra smiled, and it was like watching the sunrise. "That's a beautiful answer, Jake." Later that day, Jake made his first real act of rebellion. It was small, almost insignificant. Dr. Peterson had ordered that Lyra's reading time be reduced to put more pressure on her, to cooperate with the enhanced interrogation sessions. Instead of removing the books from her quarters, Jake simply failed to mention the order when the shift changed. It was a tiny thing, but it felt enormous. For the first time in his military career, Jake had deliberately disobeyed a direct order. Not for any grand principle, but simply because he couldn't bear the thought of Lyra losing one of the few comforts she had. In her prison, the next act of rebellion was bigger. During a particularly brutal psychological evaluation session, Jake watched through the monitors as Dr. Peterson and his team used increasingly aggressive tactics to break down Lyra's mental defenses. They bombarded her with strobe lights, played discordant sounds at painful volumes, and peppered her with questions designed to confuse and disorient. Through it all, Lyra maintained her composure. But Jake could see the toll it was taking. Her luminescent skin had grown dimmer over the past few weeks, and she moved with less of her usual fluid grace. She was suffering, and they were the cause of it. When Dr. Peterson emerged from the session looking frustrated, Jake couldn't stay quiet. "This isn't working," he said. "Excuse me?" "The aggressive tactics. They're not making her more cooperative. They're just hurting her." Dr. Peterson's expression hardened. "She's not human, Jake. Our normal ethical considerations don't apply." Says, "Who says everyone above your pay grade? Your job is to observe and report, not to have opinions about our methods. But Jake did have opinions, and they were getting harder to ignore. That night, he found himself researching everything he could about prisoner treatment, psychological torture, and the long-term effects of isolation. What he found made him sick. Everything they were doing to Lyra fit the textbook definition of torture. The sleep deprivation, the sensory bombardment, the psychological pressure, the isolation from her own kind. If she had been human, every single technique they were using would have been considered a war crime. The revelation should have made Jake angry at the system, at Dr. Peterson, at the military chain of command that had authorized these methods. Instead, it made him angry at himself. He'd been complicit. He'd watched it happen and told himself it was necessary. That it was different because she wasn't human. But Lyra was more human than most humans Jake knew. She was kind, intelligent, curious about the world around her. She asked thoughtful questions, showed genuine concern for others, and treated everyone with dignity, even when they showed her none in return. 2 days later, Jake made a decision that would change everything. During a routine equipment maintenance check, he deliberately disabled one of the surveillance cameras in Lyra's quarters for 15 minutes. It wasn't long, but it was enough time for a real conversation. Jake. Lyra looked surprised when he entered her quarters without Dr. Peterson or any recording equipment. Is everything all right? No, Jake said honestly. Nothing about this is all right. He sat down across from her, close enough to see the flecks of silver in her purple eyes. I need you to know that I don't agree with what they're doing to you. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know. It changes everything, Lyra said softly. It means I'm not alone. You were never alone, Jake found himself saying. Even when I was trying to stay professional, trying to follow protocol, I was always on your side. I just didn't want to admit it. And now, I don't care about protocol anymore. They sat in silence for a moment, and Jake felt something shift between them. The careful distance he'd maintained, the professional boundaries he'd built, all of it crumbled in the space of a few words. Can I tell you something? Lyra asked. About my people? Jake nodded. We don't form connections lightly when we care. For someone, it's not just an emotion. It's a bond that transcends physical distance, even death. It's permanent. What are you saying? I'm saying that what I feel for you isn't just gratitude or friendship. It's deeper than that. More permanent. She paused. I'm saying that I love you, Jake, and I know you love me too, even if you haven't admitted it to yourself yet. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Love. He'd been so focused on duty, on following orders, on maintaining professional distance, that he hadn't allowed himself to name what he was feeling. But Lyra was right. He did love her, completely, desperately, in a way that made everything else in his life seem secondary. This is impossible, he whispered. Is it? You're human? I'm not. We're from different worlds, different species. What we feel for each other is real. Doesn't that matter more than anything else? Before Jake could answer, an alarm began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights flashed red, and he could hear running footsteps in the hallway outside. What's happening? Lyra asked. But Jake was already moving toward the door through the reinforced window. He could see scientists and guards running past. In obvious panic. Dr. Peterson's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. All personnel to emergency stations. We have detected multiple incoming signals from space. An estimated time to contact, 6 hours. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. 6 hours. Lyra's people were coming, and when they arrived, they would find her imprisoned, tortured, studied like a laboratory animal. They would see humanity at its worst, and Jake couldn't imagine that ending well for anyone. He turned back to Lyra, who was standing calmly in the center of her cell, looking more resigned than afraid. Your people, he said. Yes, they've found me. What will they do? Lyra met his eyes, and Jake saw something there he'd never seen before. Not fear, but sadness. It's deep, profound sadness. That depends, she said quietly, on what they find when they get here. Jake understood. The next 6 hours would determine not just Lyra's fate, but possibly the fate of both their species, and he was the only one in a position to influence. How this story ended, as he left her quarters and the surveillance system came back online, Jake knew he faced the biggest decision of his life. Follow orders and let the situation play out according to military protocol, or take action to protect the woman he loved. Even if it meant betraying everything he'd sworn to defend, the choice should have been impossible. But as Jake looked back at Lyra through the reinforced glass, he realized it was actually very simple. He knew exactly what he had to do. The facility had transformed into chaos in the hours since the alien ships were detected. Jake watched from his post as scientists ran through hallways carrying boxes of research data, while military personnel set up additional security measures. Everyone seemed to be preparing for war, and Jake felt sick knowing that Lyra was at the center of it all.
"Out, new orders!"
Lieutenant Rodriguez announced as he approached Jake's station. Rodriguez was young, ambitious, and followed every rule to the letter. Command wants round-the-clock surveillance on the subject. You're to have a partner for all shifts moving forward. Jake's heart sank. The brief moments of privacy he'd managed to steal with Lyra were now impossible. "Who's my partner?" Rodriguez said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And Jake, Colonel Williams specifically mentioned that any irregular behavior should be reported immediately. Apparently there have been concerns about your objectivity. Forced himself to remain calm. "I've followed all protocols." "I'm sure you have. But with first contact potentially happening in the next few hours, we can't take any chances." Through the observation window, Jake could see Lyra sitting on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than he'd ever seen her. The glow of her skin had dimmed significantly over the past weeks, and Jake realized, with growing horror, that she was slowly dying in captivity. "She doesn't look so dangerous now," Rodriguez commented, following Jake's gaze. "Hard to believe something so human-looking could be such a threat." "What if she's not a threat?" Jake asked quietly. Rodriguez laughed. "Come on, Jake. She's an alien. Her people are on their way here with who knows what kind of weapons. Of course she's a threat. But what if we're wrong? What if they're coming to rescue her, not to attack us? Does it matter? Orders are orders. Contain the threat, gather intelligence, and protect Earth. That's our job." Jake wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. Rodriguez saw the world in simple terms. Us versus them. Human versus alien. Duty versus everything else. There was no room in his worldview for the possibility that they might be the ones in the wrong. That afternoon, Dr. Peterson called an emergency meeting with all security personnel. The briefing room was packed with guards, scientists, and military officers. On the large screen at the front of the room, satellite images showed 3 ships positioned just outside Earth's atmosphere. "The vessels are unlike anything in our database," Dr. Peterson explained. "They're not responding to any communication attempts, but they're also not showing any aggressive behavior. They're just waiting." "Waiting for what?" someone asked. "We believe they're waiting for a response from our subject. Intelligence suggests these ships have been searching for her specifically."
Colonel Williams stepped forward.
"Which is why we're implementing Protocol 7, effective immediately." Jake felt his blood run cold. Protocol 7 was the most extreme interrogation procedure in their handbook. It involved pharmaceutical enhancement to break down mental barriers, aggressive psychological manipulation, and physical stress techniques designed to extract information at any cost. "Sir," Jake said, standing up before he could stop himself. "Protocol 7 could kill her." The room went silent. Colonel Williams fixed Jake with a stare that could have frozen fire. "That's a risk we're willing to take. The information in her head could be the key to defending our planet." "What if the information we need isn't in her head? What if it's in how we treat her?" "Sit down, Jake," the colonel ordered. "Sir, think about this logically. Our people are up there waiting. They're not attacking. They're not making demands. They're just waiting. That suggests they want peaceful contact. But if they find out we've tortured and possibly killed their representative," I said, "sit down." Jake remained standing. We could be starting a war instead of preventing one. The silence in the room was deafening. Jake could feel every pair of eyes on him, could sense the shocked disapproval of his fellow soldiers. He'd just challenged a direct order in front of the entire command structure. Sergeant Jake, you're relieved of duty pending disciplinary review, Colonel Williams said coldly. Report to detention immediately. As security guards moved toward him, Jake realized his worst fear was coming true. He was being removed from his post just when Lyra needed him most. In a few hours, they would begin Protocol 7, and there would be no one to speak for her, no one to advocate for her humanity. Colonel Jake said desperately, I'm asking you to reconsider. Not as a soldier, but as a human being. What we're about to do is wrong. What we're about to do is necessary. Take him away. Jake was escorted to a holding cell in the facility's detention area. As the door closed behind him, he felt the weight of complete helplessness. Through the small window in his cell door, he could see the activity in the hallways. Scientists carrying equipment toward Lyra's section, medical personnel wheeling, in machines he recognized from the most brutal interrogation procedures. Hours passed. Jake paced his small cell like a caged animal, his mind racing through possible escape scenarios. But the facility was too secure, and he was just one man against an entire military operation. Then, around midnight, the power went out. Emergency. Lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. The sound of alarms that seemed different from the usual emergency signals. His cell door clicked open. Jake stared at it in disbelief, then cautiously stepped into the hallway. Other cell doors were opening too, but Jake was the only prisoner in the detention area. The electronic locks had all disengaged simultaneously. Lyra, he whispered, understanding immediately. Somehow, she had interface with the facility's systems. Jake ran through the corridors, dodging confused guards and panicked scientists. The facility's communication systems were down. Elevators weren't working, and most of the electronic security measures had failed completely. When he reached Lyra's section, he found the hallway in chaos. Dr. Peterson was shouting orders at technicians who were trying to manually override the security systems. The door to Lyra's quarters stood wide open. Where is she? Dr. Peterson demanded when he saw Jake. I don't know. Jake lied, backing away slowly. You did this somehow. You helped her escape? I was in detention.
Oh.
How could I have helped her? Before Dr. Peterson could respond, the facility's intercom system crackled to life. But something that sounded like wind through crystal, like starlight. Given sound, it was beautiful and alien, and somehow sad. And Jake knew, without knowing how he knew, that it was Lyra calling to her people. Find her, Dr. Peterson screamed. Find her now. Jake slipped away in the confusion, his heart pounding. He knew where she would go. There was only one place in the facility where she could get a clear signal to the ships above. The roof access was usually heavily guarded. But in the chaos, Jake managed to reach it undetected. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his chest burning with exertion and fear. He found Lyra on the roof, standing at the very edge, her face turned toward the stars. The moonlight seemed to gather around her, making her glow like a beacon. She looked more beautiful and more alien than ever, and Jake felt his heart break knowing that this might be the last time he ever saw her. I knew you'd come, she said. Without turning around, Lyra, we have to get you away from here. They'll be coming soon. I know. She turned to face him, and Jake saw tears on her cheeks that sparkled like diamonds. But first I need to tell you something about what's going to happen next. Your people are coming for you. Yes, but not in the way you think. She stepped closer to him. Jake, my ship didn't crash by accident. I came here deliberately, knowing I might not be able to leave. Jake felt the world shift beneath his feet. What are you saying? Saying, I'm not just a lost traveler. I'm a scout, sent to evaluate whether your species is ready for contact with the greater galactic community. And what I found here, in this place, with these people, ... She gestured toward the facility below them. It's not what my people hoped to find. But you found me, Jake said desperately. Yes, I found you. Lyra smiled through her tears. And that changes everything, because you showed me that humans are capable of growth, of choosing love over fear, of seeing beyond their own narrow perspectives. You gave me hope for your species, then tell your people that. Tell them we can be better. I will. But Jake, there's something else. Something I haven't told you. She took his hands in hers, and her skin felt warm and somehow electric. When my people arrive, they'll want to take me home. If I go with them, if I leave this world, I can never come back. The journey between stars changes us. I wouldn't be the same person who loved you. Jake felt his world collapsing. What are you saying? I'm saying that I have to choose. My people, my home, my entire civilization on one side. And you, here on Earth, on the other. Before Jake could respond, the facility's lights came back on. Spotlights swept across the roof, and Jake could hear the sound of boots on metal stairs. They were out of time. Lyra, he said urgently, whatever you choose, I want you to know that loving you has been the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me remember what it means to be human. Kissed him then, soft and desperate and full. The rooftop had become a battlefield of light and shadow. Military spotlights cut through the darkness while 3 alien ships hovered silently above, their surfaces shimmering like liquid starlight. Jake stood frozen between 2 worlds, watching. As armed soldiers surrounded him and Lyra, step away from the subject, Colonel Williams shouted through a megaphone. This is your final warning. But Lyra wasn't moving. She stood at the edge of the roof, her luminescent skin now glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen it. She was beautiful and terrifying and completely alien in that moment, and Jake realized he was witnessing something that would change history forever. They're scared, Lyra said softly, her voice somehow carrying over the chaos around them. People, my people. Everyone's scared of what comes next. What does come next? Jake asked. Before Lyra could answer, a new sound filled the air. Not the harsh noise of military equipment or shouting voices, but something like singing. The alien. Ships were broadcasting music that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the soul. Jake felt tears on his cheeks without knowing why. They're asking for me to come home, Lyra translated. They're telling me the evaluation is complete, that it's time to leave this world behind. And what are you telling them? Lyra closed her eyes, and Jake watched as she seemed to have a conversation no one else could hear. Her lips moved silently, and the glow around her pulsed in rhythm with the music from above. I'm telling them about you, she said finally. About a human who chose love over duty, who saw past fear to find hope. I'm telling them that this world isn't ready for contact, but it has the potential to be. The music changed, becoming more urgent. Colonel Williams was shouting new orders, and Jake could see snipers taking position on nearby buildings. The situation was seconds away from turning violent. Lyra, Jake said desperately. You have to choose your people. Or ... I already have, she interrupted, turning to face him with a smile that broke his heart. Jake, what I told you about the journey between stars changing us, that was only part of the truth. What do you mean? The real truth is that love changes us more than any journey ever could. The person I was when I first came to Earth, she's already gone. She died the moment I realized I loved you. I can never go back to being who I was before. Jake felt hope and despair warring in his chest. So you're staying? I'm staying, but not in the way you think. Before Jake could ask what she meant, Lyra stepped to the very edge of the roof. The alien ships descended lower, their light becoming almost blinding. The military personnel on the roof were shouting, but their words were lost in the increasing volume of the alien song. Jake, Lyra called over the noise, do you trust me? With my life? Jake looked at her outstretched hand, then at the 100-foot drop beyond the roof's edge, then at the alien ships hovering in the sky. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was insane. But his heart, the part of him that had fallen, in love with an impossible woman from the stars, knew exactly what to do. He took her hand. Whatever happens next, Lyra said, know that you saved me. Not from this place, but from the loneliness of never knowing what it meant to truly connect with another soul. And then she jumped. Jake's military training kicked in automatically. He pulled back, trying to stop their fall. But Lyra was stronger than any human. Instead of falling, they were somehow suspended in midair. Caught in a beam of light from one of the ships above, Around them, the world had gone completely silent. The military personnel, the scientists, even Colonel Williams stood frozen like statues. Time itself seemed to have stopped. "This is how my people travel," Lyra explained as they floated upward. "Not through space, but through the spaces between. Moments, we can step outside of time itself. Are we going to your world? No. We're going somewhere else. Somewhere neither of our peoples have been before." The ship's interior was like nothing Jake had ever imagined. Not cold metal and technology, but something that felt alive and warm. The walls pulsed gently with soft light, and the air smelled like flowers and rain. Other beings moved through. The corridors all similar to Lyra, but each unique in their own way. They watched Jake with curious, kind eyes, but none seemed surprised by his presence. "They know about you," Lyra explained. "I've been sharing our story with them as it happened. They find it fascinating that two beings from different worlds could form such a connection." "What happens now?" "Now we have a choice. My people have decided that Earth isn't ready for open contact. The way you've been treated, the experiments, the fear and violence, it shows that humans need more time to grow." Jake felt a crushing weight of shame. "I'm sorry, we're not all like that." "No, you're proof of that. Which is why they're offering us an alternative." Lyra led him to what seemed to be the ship's center, a circular room with transparent walls that showed the Earth spinning slowly below them. It was beautiful and fragile and perfect, and Jake understood why someone would want to protect it. "There are other worlds," Lyra continued. "Planets where both our species could live, where we could build something new together. Places where the love we found could grow into something that benefits everyone." "You're asking me to leave?" "Earth forever. I'm asking you to help me build a bridge between worlds, a place where humans and my people could meet safely, could learn from each other without fear or violence." Jake looked down at his home planet, thinking about everything he would be leaving behind: his military career, his country, his entire species. But then he thought about what he would be gaining: a chance to create something beautiful with the woman he loved, a future where their different worlds could come together in peace. "What about the people down there?" he asked. "What about humanity's future?" "That's the beautiful part. We wouldn't be abandoning them. We'd be preparing the way for them. In 50 years, maybe 100, when humanity has grown beyond its current fears, we could return. We could be the ambassadors who finally bring our peoples together." Jake understood then that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Not just for him and Lyra, but potentially for both their civilizations. "There's one more thing," Lyra said softly. "If you come with me, if you choose this path, you'll change too. Not immediately, but over time. The journey between worlds. The life we'd build together, it would make you more than human. Not less, but more. Would I still be me? You'll always be the man who chose love over fear, who saw past differences to find connection. That part of you will never change." Jake looked one last time at Earth, at the facility where he'd met Lyra, at the life he'd known for 29 years. Then he looked at her, glowing with starlight and possibility, offering him a future he'd never dreamed possible. "I've spent my whole life following other people's orders," he said finally. "Maybe it's time I started making my own choices." "What do you choose?" Jake smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Choose love. I choose you. I choose the chance to build something beautiful." As their ship turned away from Earth and began its journey to the stars, Jake watched his home world grow smaller in the viewing portal. He felt no sadness, only anticipation for what lay ahead. 50 years later, when two ships approached Earth, carrying ambassadors from a distant world, the people of that planet would learn that love truly was the universal language. And somewhere, among the stars, in a place where two species had learned to live in harmony, Jake and Lyra would smile and remember the day they chose each other over everything else in the universe. Their love had started in a prison cell, but it had ended up freeing both their worlds.